substratum of the universe is not seen by us, and yet it is very much there. What you see is the tree, the manifestation. The same thing was communicated in the imagery of Shivalinga. Shivalinga is an ellipsoid figure. Half of it is submerged below the ground. So the upper half is the manifested world which you see. The lower half which you don't see is unmanifest Brahman. So Asvattha also is called that because Ashva, horses, were tied to this tree. Asvattha. This vriksha, this tree, has been termed in two different ways. It's called samsara vriksha, which is the world. It is also called Brahma vriksha. So the root is the Brahma vriksha. The manifested tree above is the samsara vriksha. Why is it called that? Because even though the manifested world appears disparate, appears different, it is still in essence Brahman. So he says now, he who knows, one who knows it means what? Knows both aspects. Knows the Brahman which is the root, and also knows the tree which is the manifestation. One who knows the difference between the origin of the world, the universe, and the manifested world is one who knows everything. He knows the Vedas because the Vedas are the most ancient revelations of knowledge, the most ancient repository of knowledge, which give us the most important knowledge of Brahman. Brahman is the theme of the Vedas. So one who understands both the substratum Brahman and the manifested world is a knower of the Vedas, Vedavit. Why does he say that? Because we tend to believe that mere mastery of the Vedas, the texts, merely knowing the mantras and the verses and learning them by heart makes us knowers of the Vedas. No. There are people who never knew the Vedas, didn't know a single word of the Vedas, and yet got to the state of self-realization. They were called Vedavit. That's what he's saying here. So don't look at the superficial, don't go by the letter of the Vedas. Get to the spirit of the Vedas. Once you get to your own spirit, you automatically become the knower of all Vedas. You become Brahmavit, Brahmajna. Verse 2.
अधश्चोर्ध्वं प्रसुतास्तस्य शाखाः गुणप्रवृद्धा विषयप्रवालाः अधश्च मूलान्यनुसन्ततानि कर्मानुबन्धीनि मनुष्यलोके.
Nourished by gunas, its branches extend below and above. Sense objects are its buds, and the roots spread below, generating bonds of action in the human world. Now he continues with the description of this Asvattha tree, this imagery of the universe and the Brahman that is supporting it. Mind you, in verse 1, he uses the word Moola, which means root singular. Here, in verse 2, he says Moolani, plural, roots. What does it mean? There is a primary root and there are secondary roots that emerge from that primary root. And actually, it's the secondary roots that clutch the earth and lend stability to the tree. If a tree were to have only the primary root, it will be easy to uproot it. But a tree is very difficult to uproot because of the secondary roots. It forms a maze of its own and it's very difficult to pull it out. So similarly, now what he's saying here is, this one primary root represents Brahman, signifies Brahman, symbolizes Brahman. The secondary roots that emerge from this primary root represent the vasanas, which means ignorance. So this is a subtle idea. Ignorance is inherent in Brahman, in anything for that matter. As you walk out of here, suppose there's a dark spot and you see a rope lying on the floor, on the ground. Because of the improper light, your foot gets onto that rope and suddenly you look down and you mistake it for a snake. Alright? What is the first step? The first step is, because of inadequate light, you don't see the rope as a rope. This is ignorance. So although the rope is there, the ignorance of the rope, when you don't see the rope as a rope, the ignorance is the seed, the cause for various possible misunderstandings. You can misunderstand it as a snake, you can think it's a crack in the earth, you can think several things. But the ignorance of the rope is inherent in the rope. In other words, you cannot mistake the rope for, let's say, an elephant. You can only mistake the rope for a snake. The qualities have to be parallel. So, ignorance of anything is inherent in it. Ignorance of Brahman is inherent in Brahman itself. So, vasanas are the ignorance that emerge from the Brahman itself, and it is these vasanas which manifest as thought, desire and action, and all put together create the world and the human being's attachment to the world. Therefore, he says, generating bonds of action in the human world, and this bondage comes because of actions. Bondage comes because of the vasanas, thoughts, desires and actions. So, there are 4 things that he speaks of in this verse. One is, the main root is Brahman. The secondary roots that emerge from it are vasanas. The branches are the activities. The expression of the vasanas, the ultimate expression of the vasana is action. And now he says something interesting. He says sense objects are its buds. Why he says this is because a vasana remains dormant in you until the corresponding sense object is available to you in the environment. Then the vasana starts manifesting. Let's say, for instance, you have a vasana for cricket. Sitting here in this auditorium, there is no avenue for the vasana to manifest in your mind as thought, desire and action, and so therefore that vasana remains dormant. But this morning, when you opened the newspaper and read that the test match is starting in Nagpur and there is a live telecast of it, the sense object is available to you, at least on television. So what do? The vasana for cricket starts manifesting, you actually go out and watch the test match. So therefore, unless the environment makes available a sense object which corresponds to your vasana, the vasana remains dormant within you. Therefore, he says, the sense objects are the buds. So, and all these are nourished by the gunas. Gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas. Every one of us has a peculiar combination of sattva, rajas, tamas which function in a particular way. So this combination of sattva, rajas and tamas pervades everything that you do. What kind of vasanas you have determines what kind of thoughts you have, what kind of desires you have, what type of activities you will perform, how you will perform that particular action, and how you will relate to the world. Everything is determined by your gunas. Verses 3 and 4 will be taken together.
न रूपमस्येह तथोपलभ्यते नान्तो न चादीर्न च सम्प्रतिष्ठा अश्वत्थमेनं सुविरूढमूलम् असङ्गशस्त्रेण दृढेन चित्वा ततः पदं तत्परिमार्गितव्यम् यस्मिन् गता न निवर्तन्ति भूयः तमेव चाद्यं पुरुषं प्रपद्ये यतः प्रवृत्ति प्रसृता पुराणी.
Its form is not discerned exactly here, nor its end, origin or foundation. It means This tree, Asvattha tree, the universe and where it came from. Having cut apart this firmly rooted Asvattha with the strong weapon of non-attachment, then tataha, that goal should be sought, which having attained, they do not return again. I shall attain that primordial Purusha alone, Supreme Self alone, from which the eternal activity has manifested. These are some of the verses which, the moment you translate them into English, it loses its power. You have to get to the original verse. How he says, Ashvattamenam suvirudhamulam, this firmly rooted tree, Asvattha tree. What do you do with it? Asangashastrena dridhena chitva. Cut it asunder, blow it apart with the strong axe of detachment. Blow what apart? Don't look for weapons, please. No, you don't blow the world apart. What do you blow? Your attachment. So this wonderful universe with its infinite possibilities, you have no idea where it came from, vast and varied. It doesn't seem to have an end. You don't know where it began from. What is its foundation? Because Brahman is eternal, all-pervading, infinite. It has no form. It has no beginning, no end. And so is the case with vasanas. So is the case with the world. Everything seems to be one big mystery. And yet, there is some solidity to this universe. And this solidity is caused not by itself, but because of your attachment to it. Anything that you are attached to becomes real to you. Anything that you are detached from becomes unreal to you. And how do you cut this? What must you cut? Not the tree, your attachment to it. Not the world, your attachment to the world. Not your family members, but your attachment to the family members, which mucks things up completely, which messes things up. So, what is the spiritual path? There are two aspects of spirituality. Number one, viveka, discrimination, where you move to the higher. You gain knowledge of the higher and you move to the higher. So you move means your thoughts shift. Thoughts shift from the mundane, the routine, the physical, to that which is beyond the physical. So as your thoughts shift to the higher, as you gain viveka, discrimination, it must be accompanied by vairagya, which is dispassion. You've got to be able to move beyond the lower things which are now captivating you. You see, what happens is, as long as you're small-minded, you're caught up with the trivial entanglements in life, your mind is not free to even think of the higher. So at least temporary withdrawal is necessary. That's called vairagya, as you've done right now. Let's face it, between 6:30 and 8 in Mumbai city, there are enough avenues for indulgence and enjoyment. The fact that you have withheld all that and come here, there is an element of vairagya, there is an element of withdrawal. That unit withdrawal is necessary to shift the focus of your attention to something higher. And as you get established in the higher, the lower automatically ceases to captivate you. So the two need to go together. You cannot force vairagya, then it leads to hypocrisy, it leads to frustration. You can't say, from today onwards, I will not do this. That's a negative way of looking at things. What you should do is, make up your mind, commit yourself to a little bit of withdrawal, let's say an hour a day. And that 1 hour, you dedicate yourself to gaining knowledge of the higher, and that will pay rich dividend, because as you get established in the higher, the lower will fall off. This is called vairagya. So there needs to be a judicious mix of viveka and vairagya, for which you need to understand the spiritual path has two things. One, invariable. What is the invariable? That you wake up ideally. Don't get frightened, please. But the ideal thing is that you should be able to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, 4 a.m. It's called Brahma Muhurta time. And dedicate that early morning time to the intake of scriptural knowledge. If you can't wake up at 4, what we recommend is start by waking up half an hour before your normal wake up time, which is not so painful. And then go through the spiritual practices, attend lectures, exercise, do a little bit of bhakti, etc., etc. All this is invariable. You have to do it. The variables are depending on your vasana mix, depending on your nature, depending on your personality. You need, and because you have desires, you need to give yourself a little bit of the world. Let's say, eating out, watching a movie, going on a vacation with your family, etc. I don't need to tell you all this. You are experts at it. But again, what is required is a judicious mix of the invariable and the variable. So your variables should not be so strong that they interfere with the invariable. At the same time, the variables you should not deny yourself to such an extent that it interferes with your spiritual path. In other words, you shouldn't deny yourself so much that 4 o'clock in the morning when you wake up to study the scriptures, the thought in your mind is Chinese food. So that is an impediment. So therefore, a judicious mix, an intelligent combination of the two is what is required. Then, tataha, in verse 4, he says, then means what? After detaching yourself, asanga shastrena dridhena chitva, by the weapon of non-attachment, how do you get detached from the lower? Only when you get attached to the higher. How do you get attached to the higher? Performance of karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga. We've got so used to these pat answers. Of course, karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga. This is like the ads that you see on television. Suddenly say, mutual funds, you can't make out a word of what is happening. Similarly, we rattle off karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga. Arre, what is karma yoga? Karma yoga is shifting your thought to the higher, fixing a higher ideal, and every moment of your waking life is absorbed in the higher. So much so that you have no time to think of the lower desires. Initially, that's what happens. And over time, you find that the lower desires are not there. So even when you have an opportunity to, let's say, go shopping or eat out or whatever it is, you find there is the inclination to do that itself has weakened. This is karma yoga. Bhakti yoga is an acute awareness of a divine providence that is functioning. Every moment of your life, you are deeply aware and actively attuned to that power. As is said in the Lord's Prayer, thy will be done. And when you come to know of this benevolent force, this divine hand, this helping hand, then you understand that God knows better than me. And therefore you stop making demands. You see, what happens is, the moment you feel, you function in a way that you take charge of your personality, God leaves you be. Then you feel, oh, God is not being kind to me. Where is the divine force? There is nothing. There is no grace in my life. The grace is there. But you have put an impediment to it. You have shut out God, in other words. Bhakti yoga is opening your heart and soul to this divine providence. And the moment you become aware of it, you understand that He who made me knows exactly what I need, which is so true. Every moment of your life, you get exactly what you need. Even what you consider as the worst thing that has happened in your life, much later you understand that in fact was the best thing. You did not understand it then. So, whenever you look at tragedies, you see any challenge in life is really best suited for your development. As Socrates said, when a young man went to Socrates and asked him, I'm in a quandary, I don't know whether to marry or not to marry. Socrates said, of course you must marry. Definitely go ahead and marry. And then he explained, because the young man looked a bit confused. He says, if you get a good wife, you'll be a happy man. If you get a bad wife, you'll become a philosopher. Now there are people who have good wives and good husbands, but they have nasty neighbors, so that they are also good for you. That's why we have all come here. So the nastier the neighbor, the worse your spouse, you must thank God. But for this person, I would not, my marks in spiritual growth would not have been as fast if I didn't have such people around me. So you stop resisting things in life. You understand that there's this divine force functioning. This is bhakti. And then jnana yoga is the shift in focus to the permanent. You see, it's like this. If you put your finger in front of your eye, you have the option of looking at your finger, focusing on the finger. When you focus on the finger, whatever is behind the finger is out of focus, gone. But if you look at what is behind the finger, incredibly, the finger almost becomes transparent. You see through the finger. And so is it with our personality. Our personality consists of 4 factors, 4 components: the body, mind, intellect, and Atman, self, correct. The body, mind, and intellect today come in the way of your vision of reality, of the self. The spiritual path is to shift the focus from body, mind, and intellect to spirit, and then this body, mind, and intellect become almost transparent. And that's what he's speaking of. That is jnana yoga. And the moment you get that, then you understand that goal should be sought. That goal should be sought. You must understand that the mission in life is to realize the soul. You and I are born in this world with only one purpose, and that is to realize the self. Unfortunately, we don't know it, and therefore we are doing everything except that. A person who is absolutely clued in, who is totally focused on realizing the self, he does everything else. He might go out with you, he might party with you, he might follow a career, he might do whatever else that anybody else does. With one difference, he's totally focused on the self. That goal must be sought. That's the only mission in life. And then, that once you reach that goal, there is no going back. There is no yasmin gatva nanivartanti bhuyaha. So once you get there, there is no return. Once you go up, it's a one-way street. There is no return. Then he says, Tameva chadyam purusham prapadye. I shall attain that state. There is this commitment to get there. Unless you commit yourself to anything, you will not achieve it. Spiritual practice is not a casual approach to life. If I feel like it, I'll come. If I don't feel like it, I won't come. It doesn't work. There must be that commitment. Second, you must seek refuge in Brahman. Today we are seeking refuge in money, in position, in power, status, everything except Brahman. And the third is, once you do all of this, your mind becomes prepared for meditation. So with this, we conclude for the day